G'day, I'm Pete, the Aussie Bush Cop. In 2012 I retired from the New South Wales Police and moved to beautiful King Island, where I become a homesteader and hopefully a little bit more cultured. And I have some stories of crime and criminals from the New South Wales to share with you. And with a bit of a cheeky grin, I said to him, "Mate, have you actually read this, like from the top to the bottom?" No, I don't need to." And he carried on again. It just started again. I said, "Mate, actually just read it." G'day everybody. Thanks so much for being with me again. I really look forward to sharing these stories with you. The first story today is a funny one. One day I was at a police station and a mature-aged man came to the counter, and he was in a really foul mood, and he was banging on about the injustices of police and conspiracies and you name it. We're in league with the devil and the mafia and all the rest of it. And I just let him say whatever he had to say, and he put a document onto the counter, and he was pointing at it and telling me about it. And what it was he was telling me was that he got a speeding ticket when he didn't exceed the speed limit by I think it was by a fixed, in Australia they have fixed cameras on the side of the road which will record your number plate and send you a speeding ticket. Anyway, after a while, it was almost like we're in court and he was a barrister prosecuting me. And after a while he sort of pushed this document towards me, and I picked it up, and I think he was still talking, but he got to the point where he was just repeating himself. So I actually read it. And when not long after I started reading it, I realised he'd made a big mistake. With a bit of a cheeky grin, I said to him, "Mate, have you actually read this, like from the top to the bottom?" No, I don't need to. And he carried on again. It just started again. I said, "Mate, actually just read it." And so, with some insistence, he then took the document and started to read it. And before long, a sheepish grin crept across his face, because what it was that one of his friends was having an absolute joke with him. They had rather successfully put a New South Wales Police logo on the top of this letter, and what it was an invitation to a birthday party. And he just read the first part, which said about how he'd been detected speeding, and so he then took it in good humour, and he'd spent his rage and his anger and realised it was just all a mistake and someone was just having a joke, and they quite clearly picked a good candidate to play that joke on. Anyway, at the end of it, I just said, "Mate, wish the birthday boy a happy birthday from me too," and we left on good terms. The second story is not funny at all. It happened at one of the really small stations that I was at, a one-man station, and these stations were generally about 5 hours drive west of Sydney, if you're familiar with where Sydney is. And this bloke came to the station with a complaint of having been assaulted the night before, I think it might have been, and quite clearly he had been badly beaten and injured in the face, quite badly. It was quite a nasty injury he had to his face, and he told me that he'd been out and he had a run-in with people that he knew. And one of the benefits of these small country areas is that people rarely say, when I say who's the suspect, rarely do they say, well, it was someone that was 5'9" and they had a brown shirt and blue jeans. They just say it was Joe, because everyone knows each other. Anyway, he had been knocked to the ground and subsequently bitten on the face. Really nasty thing to do. And there was a group of men that did this to him. And the victim was probably around 50 years old. And I gave him all the options because he wasn't clear or sure what he wanted to do. Now, I gave him the options, which included doing nothing. And to do nothing, I then needed a statement from him to say that he'd been assaulted, but he wanted no police action, and that would have been the end of it. I'd make a record on the computer, and that was the end of it. Second one was to take out a personal violence order against the person. The third one was to make a formal statement of complaint of being assaulted, and then I would investigate it, and no doubt at the end of it, subsequently take statements from all persons concerned, because there was quite a few witnesses, and then if it seemed correct to me, to then go and arrest the persons that did it. A few days later, before he left the station on that day, I actually took photographs of his injuries. A few days later, he came back and he decided on the latter option. So I did that, and then took statements from everyone concerned, and then went and arrested the three offenders named, or the three suspects named in the statements. There was a plea of not guilty entered by all three offenders, or all three suspects, I should call them. With such a lot of witnesses, the court officials set aside the court for the entire day for the hearing. Now, on the day of the hearing, there was an offer, and this is not unusual, there was an offer by the defence for one of the offenders to plead guilty if we dropped the charges against the other two. Now, the charge was that I laid against the three of them was assault occasioning actual bodily harm in company, which is a pretty serious matter. So of course, on the day of the hearing, all persons are there, like meaning the alleged victim and the witnesses. And so in consultation between the prosecutor, the defence counsel, and most importantly, the victim, we decided to accept a plea of guilty against one of the offenders and drop the charges against the other two. So therefore the charge was amended to simply assault occasioning actual bodily harm. And that's what happened. And some people get it, when I read stories like that in the paper, they become irritated, thinking that, that there was a plea deal and all the rest of it. And sometimes maybe those concerns are valid, but I'm not going to make any comment about the alleged victim in the matter, but once you knock back a plea of guilty, you then, all the other evidence that you've got is really open to then being cross-examined. And of course, the matter can be found not guilty. So it's always been my policy in life generally that half of something is better than all of nothing. The other story I have for you has got to do with a noise complaint that I went to. Now, in the hurly and burly of noise complaints, of general duties policing in Dubbo, which is about 5 hours drive west of Sydney, it's certainly in very rural areas, generally a noise complaint is something which is not that bad to go to, because they're good-natured people, they're just having fun, they're just full of grog, the music's turned up loud and they're in suburbia, and the bloke next door or the bloke down the street or the lady down the street, they just don't want to hear it. And at 2 o'clock in the morning they've had enough and they ring us. So anyway, we went along, and what I normally do with a noise complaint is you give what's called a noise abatement direction. But at this particular job, that didn't happen. We went there and there was a relatively small party going on in a backyard. And the yard was on a corner. And so we were looking over the fence. I was looking over the fence. I'm quite tall, and I could easily see over the fence into the backyard. And I don't think it had anything to do with the fact that we were there and they could see that we were there. But a fight then broke out between parties at the party. They were belting each other. Now, my partner on that particular shift was quite short, and I could have easily jumped the fence and landed in the middle of this melee, but I would have landed there on my own, because to get in there, my partner would have had to run up the street, into the front yard, down through another fence and get in there. He would have taken some seconds to get in there. And so I think that's what we decided to do. We got in there, and as soon as I got in there, A fellow, of course, once we were there, we then became the common enemy. They forgot about hating each other. We became the common enemy. And I got shunted in the chest, and I got pushed backwards through the fence. It was one of those metal fences, and I went through the fence and landed heavily on my backside and my back. And I remember then looking up, and the fellow who pushed me through the fence, this young man, was then trying to kick me, and I was darting left and right as he parried blows with his feet towards me, none of them connected. I then quickly got to my feet and pushed him. He then retreated back through the fence, and then he wouldn't go any further. So then he grabbed hold of the railing. I should have mentioned that when I went through the fence, my head hit one of the top parallel rail as I went through the fence. And then he wouldn't let go of that fence, so I got out my baton, and I was slamming my baton next to his fingers so that to try and get him to let go. So that was successful. I then took hold of him. In the meantime, I said to my partner, who was wearing the radio, the portable radio, get urgent assistance here. Anyway, so the urgent assistance arrived, and as I was still trying to subdue this young man that had pushed me through the fence, I had him up against the fence, part of the fence that was still standing, and was giving him knee strikes. It's a prescribed move where we use our knee and strike them to the thigh, and it's pretty painful. And so when let's say the cavalry arrived, and I was knee striking this man, trying to get him on the ground. And anyway, so we subdued them. We took, I can't remember now, but maybe 2 or 3 of them back to the station to process them for various offences. Anyway, later in the shift, after that, one of the police that was there, the cavalry arrived, and he said he had a particularly dry delivery. And he said, "Now listen here, Gillett," he said, "when I arrived," he said, "were you knee striking that bloke or trying to mount him?" Anyway, so that's how that job all panned out. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.